Kendall, Warson, spent years in the art industry. Having raised over 6 million, she's building Cohort.
People are selling $5,000 paintings and they're sending it on a DM on Venmo. And it's like, that's crazy. Only 14% of artists have galleries. So 86+% are using assembly or assemblage of systems that don't really work for them, the art world at all. Fundamentally pretty broken. The dream and the big vision for Cohort is that you see a piece of art and you can see the artist's history, visibility to the artists that you collect from. We've pitched probably 400 plus, maybe 500 investors. Some of them went very south and they were like very mean to me, and you get your first 50K investment. I get punched in the face now, it hurts less. When it happens to me, my recovery time is so fast. I almost laugh through it. I do think I was raised to be a founder. My mom was the breadwinner. It's like a very gendered industry. In her day, she was the only woman in the room, like 95% of the time. And every day, like you can do anything, you can be anything. It was a high bar in our household. If you get a B, what's going on? That sort of discipline and that attitude was ingrained from me and my sisters at a very young age. We didn't have crayons in our household growing up. I had to fight against this perception of art not being like a credible thing. I went to Parsons, and I think I'm definitely the only one in like my current extended family to go to design school. But I believe that art is a big opportunity and that everyone buys art and there's a lot of business abundance there. And there's this perception that it's just this lolly-dolly thing where people aren't serious and they're not like credible. I think my chip on my shoulder with Cohort ultimately is about proving that's not true. I walk at least 10,000 steps a day, like no audio. I play soccer 4 times a week. I journal, I like meditate. Yesterday we just had the first $70,000 sale process through like our invoice system. You need to be like fundamentally a little bit crazy, like really go after something and try to change this like old antiquated market all on your own or with your co-founder. And you have to believe it's possible.
Hello, everyone. Our guest today has spent years in the art industry, curating shows with over 200,000 people audiences in both North America and Asia, while managing a network of over 500 international artists. Now, having raised over 6 million, she is building Cohort, a platform that provides the easiest way today to buy, sell, and discover art online. From Brooklyn, New York, please welcome Kendall, Warson. Hi, Kendall.
Hello. What an intro. I love it.
Can you tell us a bit about your mission at Cohort? What are you trying to bring into this world?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I used to build these traveling immersive art shows throughout the US and throughout Asia. And I got to work with a lot of artists one-on-one and realized that the majority are small to medium-sized business owners. So they're doing everything from invoicing to filing taxes. And most of them don't have a central system to do that. Like they really are using this hodgepodge of multiple tools and software systems. And only 14% of artists have galleries. So 86+% are using, this, again, assembly or assemblage of systems that don't really work for them. So when we were looking at like the mission statement and just like thinking about art, it was like, okay, how do these people really sell art? And it's fundamentally pretty broken. Like as an artist, there's no good way to find a distribution channel to sell, to manage your business. And at the same time, I'm a millennial, and looking around and seeing my friends think about art, it was sort of like the last vertical that felt inaccessible. You look at music or travel or food, fashion, like there's so many ways to feel confident about other cultural mediums. But with art, the majority of people don't feel like collectors, right? Like it still feels like a fancy word. It still feels like this sort of unattainable identity. So again, mission statement wise, it was like, okay, selling is broken, but so is buying and so is discovering. And can we build a new type of platform that really brings collecting into the next generation and helps broaden the market? Because ultimately we all own art, like we all have stuff on our walls, but so few of us have a positive experience when we're buying and collecting. So we're really trying to address both sides of the equation and build kind of like category defining company that brings collecting and selling discovery again into the next chapter of the market.
What I've noticed in my life that people who are very creative, they
Mm-hmm.
tend to lack business savviness, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And without having a platform like this, how would how would painters, artists go about presenting their work? Like, where
Yeah,
do you go? Who,
it's so interesting. I mean, there's this saying that if people are still using Venmo for like a purchase outside of a friend to friend transaction, like there's an opportunity there. And we started to see that with artists. People are selling $5,000 paintings and they're sending it on a DM on Venmo, and it's like that's crazy. Like they don't have a central place to send a credible invoice, and they don't have a way to track that buyer's information and to put them into a funnel and a place to store their email. So today, most artists they get an MFA, right? So they study art and then they're studying a master's in art, and there's no business course. Like it's sort of like get a gallery or that's it, And so most
go
people,
outside and post your work near the park to
yeah,
showcase?
exactly, yeah. And so a lot of people, galleries aren't bad necessarily bad actors, but they do take 50+% of your sales. And so even if you are selling with a gallery and you are successful in getting representation, it's still pretty hard to make it work, in terms of your business. But what's been really interesting is Instagram has disrupted this market tremendously. Artsy came out in, I think it was like 2008, and that was the first sort of revolutionary platform of moving the art world online. People could post work online. All of a sudden, access is sort of broadened. But then Instagram started to disrupt it in like 2014, 2015. And then all of a sudden, artists realized, okay, I can have my own distribution channel. I can sell directly. So that's really what we've been picking up on, is trying to navigate that generation of artists and like, okay, if they have their own distribution channel, how are they doing everything else? And can we centralize that and then ultimately build the best distribution channel that's focused on art? So the short answer is there's no good system today, and that's why we're building this. And a lot of artists need it. They don't want to spend time on admin. Like they want to make art and they want to connect with their audiences, and
Mhm.
they don't have tools and resources and the education to like streamline a business operation on their own.
And what do you think affects the overall demand for art transactions? Are there any trends?
Yeah, I mean, the word cohort is about art discovery through the lens of human connection and community. And fundamentally, what we are working on is a socially signaled marketplace, a space where you can see who's collecting from who and driving scarcity through signaling, which is something that we see in a lot of other markets, like StockX famously, like starting to build price graphs, or Google Maps, like you can see who's going to different places and what the reviews are. And when you look at art online, it's just this JPEG and a price point, right? And it's like, how do you know that that should be $5,000 or $50,000 or $50? And how do you know that that artist is credible? And there's just no way to perceive value. So the dream and the big vision for Cohort is that you see a piece of art and you can see the artist's history, you can see who they're connected to. I can see what you're collecting, you can see what I'm collecting. And if you're a hot collector, you've made some great investments, like then people will follow you, and then you'll have a halo effect and you'll drive more traffic and visibility to the artists that you collect from. So that's kind of how it works in like the art world, like traditional art world. But we're trying to move that behavior online. Um, and when you look at the traditional art world, it's very much in person. It's driven in fairs and gallery shows and auction houses, and it's very much like a C and B scene. Who's there, what critic is there, who's collecting first, how are you driving scarcity around a certain amount of artists. And a lot of artists that work in that more traditional system, they have a limit on how many paintings they can make or whatever their medium is, because they want to drive scarcity. So the galleries will work with them to make sure that there's a certain amount of collectors that are collecting their work, and then there's only a certain amount available for the supply, because the demand has to be, you want the supply to be constrained so the demand grows. So I think it's just really interesting. I think the whole network is fueled by that social side of things, and then ultimately value is what is driven from that whole network effect. And that's something that we're really excited about disrupting. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think just in general, the art market, it's been a very relationship fueled market. And so that's what drives all the trends fundamentally.
And how important is the role of storytelling? Because
Yeah.
I believe usually you don't just compare it to paintings and like, okay, what is the technique? Well, to some extent, but then what really drives the value is the personal story, the struggles. Like, what does it impersonate? And is that
Yeah.
something that you encourage people in your platform to do?
Yeah. I think fundamentally storytelling is branding. Like I always say, if you, let's say you're in a Walgreens and you see a Revlon lipstick, right? When you see, or a Tommy Hilfiger shirt, like you're going to see that billboard image of that brand, and Tommy Hilfiger has like a lifestyle aspirational persona, and then you wear the logo, and that kind of justifies spending a certain amount of money on that garment. But if it doesn't have a logo, if you've never really heard about the story of Tommy Hilfiger and it's just this, $120 shirt, it's kind of like, like why would you buy it,
Yeah,
right? And so I think for art, again, sort of this white cube trend where it's like, okay, present your work in this opaque box and don't say what the price is, don't have an accessible website online. Like that's sort of the traditional ethos, is like kind of be discreet. And I just think it's really hard to connect with buyers when you are like, when you're presenting your work like that. And the opposite approach is like what you mentioned, is much more of like a brand driven storytelling approach, where an artist really is communicating their story. They have ownership over their message. They are branding their art with their personality. And we see all of our successful artists like at the forefront of their brand. They spend 50% of their time marketing, 50% of their time making work, and they're proud to talk about it. And it's one of those things where once you meet them, and you hear the story, you want to buy it. Like, and if
yeah,
you connect with them, and then you end up buying the piece, then you can tell your friends about it, and then you have this emotional resonance with that object. And I think that that's so powerful in terms of unlocking more demand for your work. And
yeah.
I think that the most successful artists of the next, again, subsequent generations will be owners of their brand, and they're going to be owning their story. And that's very different than the gallery model, where someone else had ownership of your brand, and you really never had the capacity to tell your own story. But I think that's what we're all looking for in the next
Yeah.
generation. We want to feel connected to the work itself.
I think if you ask a lot of younger people nowadays, like, what do you think about collections and art? They would tell, they would probably remember the NFT craze
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was going on, the rise and the crash of the NFT era. Has this affected much of what Cohort was trying to be?
I mean, to me, the NFT craze was almost like a example case study of the fact that collecting is social, and that people want to collect together, and they want to buy into value together, and they want to feel recognized for what they're spending money on as part of a, again, communally or socially validated experience. So we originally, started in early 2020s, 2021, when all of that was booming. And I mean, to us, like, I've worked with a lot of digital artists throughout my career, and we see it as a super credible medium. Digital art is just as credible
Yeah,
as physical art. Uh, I think for us, we see a little bit of a difference between like Web 2 and Web 3 communities. A lot of Web 2 people are on Instagram, for example, versus Web 3 was mostly Twitter. And I think when you're building a company, you sort of have to choose, you have to get really focused about a distribution channel and a marketing approach and your messaging. And we decided to take a step towards the Web 2 audience, and not disassociate from the Web3 audience, but really talk to physical art as a medium, because we felt like there was a big opportunity there. But when we were fundraising, a lot of people in that time they're like, why do you want to do physical art? And like, how come you just shouldn't double down on digital art? And then after the bubble popped, then people came back to us and they're like, okay, actually, so it's been interesting to watch. And I think, again, NFTs are exemplary of the fact that like we do want to see who's collecting from who. We want to be part of this communal collecting experience. But I think that that can also apply to physical art just as much as it applies to digital art.
I was thinking about how the TV series Queen's Gambit has affected the whole world of chess and the amount of
Yeah.
users that would like get into chess. After the NFT race kind of went down, did you have a lot of people who were like, okay, we now know how to collect.
Mm.
We kind of feel like once the value could be lost because sometimes it's gamble, you still want to have something.
Mhm.
And with if you switched from digital to traditional, you would still have an incredible painting with a story. Did you have a lot of people kind of switching towards the
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. I mean, I think that um, it's like what you mentioned with Queen's Gambit. It's sort of this pathway towards a conversation about chess, right? And it makes chess feel more attainable. I mean, that's also kind of an inaccessible sport or game, so to speak, right? It's kind of has this prestige around it. But when you learn about the game, all of a sudden you feel more empowered to talk about it, and it feels more attainable to call yourself a chess player or to like explore the game more. So I think the same thing has happened with art. You know, I think people are treating like fashion, like sneaker collection, as a way to express themselves. Or again, a lot of people are building up more of like a digital brand, and that's pretty creative, you know. And I think the more that you are expressing yourself creatively, you know, the more in which you kind of open yourself into art and you feel like okay, more empowered to start thinking about collecting. And so I think, of course, NFTs had an impact on that. And I actually have like a really, when we were doing our early user interviews, there was a really profound story where this guy was saying that, you know, art collecting, you kind of need someone to hold your hand a little bit and guide you
yeah.
through. And then once you're there, it's like, oh, wow, there's this whole world that I can immerse myself in and that I can be a part of. And it's not like the door is closed. It just seems like it is, you know? So the
Yeah.
more awareness that you have and the more in which you have people kind of demystify it for you, I think that it creates more pathways for people to feel empowered to experience art. And you don't need to collect to go to a fair or to go to a gallery show, but so many people are just scared to walk through the door because the industry has been so intimidating. And that's been purposeful. You know, it's not the consumer's fault. It's like the capital A art world and how it's been structured. But I fundamentally think that that's shifting as we find more ways to express ourselves creatively and as these, again, digital trends really take off and we're trying to, you know, spend more time doing things that fulfill us and that help us round out our identity outside of work.
And how long did it take you before you've kind of conceived of the idea
Mhm.
that you want to do something like Cohort until you've actually taken the first physical step?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest part, right? The first step. Um, I think building a company is really challenging, right? Like the day to day is very challenging. But the first step, that leap of faith, like incorporating a company, telling people that you're starting something as you know, is daunting, right? Because people, a lot of people are naysayers. They're kind of, you know, following the herd. And for me, it took me some time to build up my confidence to feel like, okay, this is something I really want to do. And at my previous startup, I was the first employee. So I'd kind of seen the whole thing grow and, you know, was almost operating in a way of being a CEO within that company.
Mhm.
But I didn't call myself a CEO. You know, I sort of thought, okay, well, someone else would have the idea and I can like execute it. Um, but I saw in that company, like, again, there was this massive market opportunity for something like Cohort to exist and carry the art world forward. And my sister's a venture capitalist. And so I called her and I was like, oh, I have this idea, you know, and she's like, being a founder is the hardest job in the world. And, you know, you can do it, but it's going to be really, really hard. And of course, I was not very inspiring, but I was like, all right, you know, so I love challenging things. I think as someone that's a founder, like you're attracted to things that push you. After that conversation, you know, I started to explore it, and then I met Shavine, who is really my like better half and my counterpart. And I think when you have a partner, it really helps crystallize momentum and helps you keep pushing forward. And we spent about 6 months talking to people and trying to navigate like how do we position this, What's the opportunity? How are we going to stay focused? And we started doing these talks with our audience of these user interviews, and it went from like 3 people on a Zoom to 100, and this is like kind of in COVID, and we were talking about these prototypes, and people were like, we really want you to build this. And I think hearing that validation was extremely motivational for us. And that's what catalyzed our first angel check. And then once you have a little bit of money in the bank and you have a, Delaware C Corp, it's pretty real. So I think at that point, it happened before we knew it, but Shavine and I hadn't even met each other in person. Again, it was all amidst the pandemic.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were just going back and forth on Zoom, and we were a year and a half into the company before we met in person, which is kind of shocking, but that's kind of like the COVID era of these startups, which is very different, I think, than how it would work today.
And looking back at the whole history of you working with Siobhan, what are the tricks and secrets that made your co-founder relationship work?
It's, it's a relationship, right? I will say that if you think about friendship or romantic relationship or relationship with yourself, there's always work associated, right? You need to spend time on the relationship. You need to communicate. You need to reflect and invest in developing the relationship. So I think that's something I didn't really realize when we got started. I sort of thought, okay, it's a business partner, things just happen and it grows. But she's in Asia, I'm in the US. She's a little bit older than I am. At that time, I was like my mid-20s. And, we come from very different backgrounds, very different people, very different personalities, which is what makes it great. But, in the early days when there's really high highs and really low lows, if your relationship isn't strong, it can really throw you off. Because we're not technical, we always had a third person that would come in and be sort of like the CTO or the technical person. And we had a couple instances where, at one point that person was like closer to her, or at one point that was closer to me, and it kind of threw off our balance and equilibrium. So we actually worked with an executive coach and did like a lot of sort of founder relationship building together, which was very helpful because it
What
gave
did
us
that look like?
it's like founder therapy is what I call it. So, it's a safe space. It's like therapy, couples therapy, right? Like you go in and you talk about like what you're feeling with one another, and how you need to feel like more supported, or how, like insecurities that you might have and challenges that you're facing. And because, the coach is like trained in
Mhm.
relationship management, they're able to guide that conversation and make a really safe space for you to be extremely transparent, and to get everything off your chest versus like holding it in. And so it created this environment for us to now have an extremely open line of communication at all times. And we're always, listening to each other and able to express ourselves. And I think it creates a lot of mutual respect where, we both know our end goal is the same. And to get there, we're going to have to compromise and concede and listen to one another and be effective partners. And that is easier said than done when things
Oh,
get
yeah.
super stressful, you know? But I think all in all, it's hard to be a solo founder. And if you have a partner, it does really help you get through those times that are extremely challenging when you don't know what's going on. You don't know why you did this. It's not working. Things are stuck. And to have someone you can call and just talk to that's not your sister. It's not your boyfriend. It's not, your family member. It's like someone that really understands and is in it with you. I think that's been instrumental for us to where we are today. Like our relationship and our partnership has been what's gotten the company to this stage.
Looking back about the way that you were raised as a
Mhm.
child, if you could look back and you could change something about the way you were raised, would you change anything? And what would it be?
I hope my parents still listen to this. No,
I'll block the older
yeah.
demographic.
I think everyone has that story in their head, right? When they're a kid and they grow up, everyone has a chip on their shoulder, right? Like in the realm of the spiritual work, it's called like your conditioning, right? Like how were you conditioned to think a certain way? And there's always some, I'd say, resentment that people have most of the time. Like, oh, I wasn't raised to be ambitious enough, or I was raised to be too ambitious, or, XYZ. And it's the story that we tell ourselves as children. So I think I've done a lot of that reflecting and sort of understanding of like the way I was raised, and that gets you to a certain point, and then you have to stop blaming your parents. Like you've got to kind of take your deck of cards and deal your own hand. And if you want to change the deck of cards, like you have to go out and find new cards, But I think sitting there and like trying to expect something to change about your past is sort of it's pointless, right? So I think that that's my perspective on it. That said, like I do think I was raised to be a founder. I would say I had a really unique, yeah, exactly. I had a unique childhood as a woman, or young woman. My mom was the breadwinner in our household, and she worked, like from 0 to 1. She wasn't really handed anything in life, and had a really successful corporate career that, again, she built from scratch. And so I think seeing, again, a female role model, like persevere through challenges, especially in those days. She was in banking. It's like very gendered industry. And obviously those things have changed a little bit, but in her day, she was the only woman in the room, like 95% of the time. And I think just seeing her go through that and then tell me, like, you can do anything, every day, like you can do anything, you can be anything. It fundamentally changed the way I see the world, where I see opportunities and I take risks, and I'm someone that is like very much driven by a big vision, and I think I can do anything. And that's a rare trait, especially for women that are just trained not to take as many risks. So I think my sister and I both share that. And again, it's all attributed to her. And I'm really grateful that that's been my experience.
In order to get support and love at a young age, were there any requirements for you and your sister? Like, you have to perform well, you have to get the best grades, you have to be the leader of the soccer team at school.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I hope that they don't listen to this, but
We'll keep it down low.
yeah. I think it was, we were raised like pretty, not strictly, but it was just, I'd say it was a high bar in our household. It was sort of like my parents, again, didn't have much handed to them at all. And they both worked. And my dad worked until my mom started to like take off with her career, but they both worked, and they both have great work ethics. And I think my whole extended family has this, I don't know what the right word is, like the opposite of entitled. It's kind of like a grit or a perseverance, and you earn your reward. And like, if you don't show up to the table, what are you doing? Like, you're wasting an opportunity. Like, life is this incredible experience that we have. And like, if you work hard, so much crystallizes from that. And that's what creates opportunity. And that's what creates, ways for you to be financially independent and like have a family and live a great life. And so I think that sort of discipline and that attitude was ingrained from me and my sisters at a very young age. And it was one of those things where, like, it could be represented in a grade. Like, if you get a B, what's going on, kind of thing, because that's like a moment of a symbol. And I think for me, it was really hard because, like, I loved photography, It was like, and going to college, everyone's like, well, what's your favorite class? I was like, photography, and then everyone's kind of like laughing at you, because it doesn't feel credible. And I wanted to go to art school. Like, I went to this summer program at Rhode Island School of Design when I was 16. And it was the first time that I felt like I was really good at something. I got all A pluses. I was just like so engaged. And I didn't have like any art training. Like, we didn't have crayons in our household growing up. Like, there's not a crafty household, And so my technique like wasn't that good because I didn't grow up drawing or doing anything. But I just really wanted to be a fashion designer. Like, I had this vision and this dream of doing it. And I think I, felt kind of like laughed at from my family and from like the school environment I was in growing up. And so for me, I think I became a much more crystallized human at a younger age because I had to fight against this perception of art not being like a credible thing to do with your life. And I put a stake in the ground and I like fought really hard to make it work. And I ended up going to art school. I went to Parsons, and I think I'm definitely the only one in like my current extended family to go to design school. But I think in like my whole family history, I think I might be the only person to. Um, and I think just showing up at design school and just recognizing, okay, I've made this insane decision to
Mhm.
not study business and to study design. Like I need to make this work, you know? And I think part of what motivates me with Cohort is like, I believe that art is a big opportunity and that everyone buys art and there's a lot of business abundance there. And there's this perception that it's just this lolly dolly thing where people aren't serious and they're not like credible, you know, business people like we talked about earlier, you know, and therefore it's like, why would you talk about art? Why would you make art? Why would you collect art? Like there's a lot of shame associated
Yeah.
with it. So I think my chip on my shoulder with Cohort ultimately is about proving that's not true and proving that there's something here that just has been societally perceived in a way that makes it feel like it's not a good way to spend your time, you know?
Yeah. And what would it have meant for you to get that support from your parents for that younger Kendall? In terms of like, you
Yeah.
can do arts, like you can choose. We'll still love you regardless of you don't have to be Warren Buffett.
Yeah. It's like my therapy session. I think I wouldn't be doing this if that was the case. I think I would be not complacent, but I think I would have felt more comfortable. And I think to be a founder, you need to be uncomfortable. You know, one of my good friends always says, like, what are you mad at? And that's what I think really catalyzes innovation and grit in times when things are tough, when you're building something. In a lot of ways, I'm really grateful that I had an uphill battle when I was a kid. That, like, for me, I saw it as an uphill battle. I don't think my parents did. You know, Kendall's just doing her thing. But to declare things, you know, that you feel like something's off, you know, and say like, I actually think I'm going this way, and you guys want me to go this way. I think I just learned how to make decisions and how to, again, be my own person at a younger age. And if they had kind of overly supported me, I probably would have not taken it
Mhm.
as seriously as I did. And, you know, I was really focused in college. Like I still partied and stuff and had friends, but I was like the number one student in my class, you know, and like I again came out of school. I had a full time job while I was in school still at my dream company, and I had like by the time I was 23, I had lived my whole life map that I had like mapped out for myself. Like I wanted to go to Parsons, I wanted to work at Marc Jacobs, I wanted to work like Diane von Furstenberg, I wanted to go be this like famous fashion designer. And then I was at Marc Jacobs and Dan von Furstenberg, and I did it, you know, and I persevered. And again, I was young, and I was young enough to the point where I'd hit this amazing chapter break, and I realized I had a whole nother chapter ahead of me. I was like, oh, what do I want this to be about? Like, do I want to stay in fashion, or should I do something else in art, and find my own path in entrepreneurial pursuits? So I just think it's important to be shaped in a way from your parents, like, and recognize that they're giving you some type of a container, but you don't need to stay in that container, and you can build your own. And I think it's helpful sometimes if you're in the wrong one when you grow up and you have that friction, because it
Yeah.
makes you just a stronger person ultimately.
And that's what I see from talking to founders. Because in my career, 90% of what I do is just have discussions with
Hmm.
various founders about their startups, what they do. And what I've noticed is we have very similar trauma. We have
Yeah.
very similar things that kind of built like the grit, the perseverance. And what most of us, we've learned to lose the blame for the
Hmm.
parents for not giving us everything that we wanted when we were children. But then it really allows us to be okay with having this life, this level of
Yeah.
stress, responsibility. And looking at your story, I can see that you've combined the two. You're like, I want to do art. They want me to do business. Your sister was like, okay, business,
Yeah.
VC, let's go. And you were like, I'll combine the two.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that's what you've done like incredibly successfully in combining both the business acumen and the art inspiration that you had to create Cohort.
Yeah, I think I mean, ultimately, if I think about it now, like in design school, I was a leg ahead of other people because I had like the business sensibility from my parents, and so I kind of had both educations in this Venn diagram ingrained in me in a really young age. And now I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to address this opportunity specifically because of my own personal background, my backstory. And I think if I was too artsy, I probably wouldn't do it. And then you also see the flip side, like a lot of people have tried to democratize art collecting with these platforms, and the people aren't from the art world at all. And they don't understand like the dynamics of the market. And I've seen like
Imposters.
I've seen like three use cases of companies where these guys get to the point of uh, getting to a point of financial freedom, right? Like they've been in consulting or banking or I don't know, like name an industry where you can make a lot of money. And then all of a sudden they start to collect and they're like, oh, collecting's hard. I'm going to change it. And I'm going to build this like art platform that democratizes art collecting. And again, we've seen it multiple times. It just doesn't work because people assume that all you have to do is stick this again JPEG in a price point online, and like that's democratization. And it's not. It's not how people buy art online, and it doesn't work that way. So I think it's been really powerful for me to be like formed the way I am as a human. And I do feel like what I'm doing is such a personal experience and a personal pursuit. And it has to be because it's so challenging and it like you need to be like fundamentally a little bit crazy, like really go after something and try to change this like old antiquated market all on your own or with your co-founder. And you have to believe it's possible and that you're the person to do it. And that's, I think, the founder story that you have to like wake up breathing and living every day. Uh, that will make you successful, because you'll pursue and persevere and get through all the challenges and catalyze the opportunity.
And it's interesting. Because what you're currently doing almost looks like you're helping the younger Kendall to combine the art and the business because your
Yeah.
platform goes to the people who do art, but
Mhm.
obviously business is hard. And it's like, okay, this is how you do business. This is how you combine the business aspect with it.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's something that I've done a lot with my executive coach is like the what's it called? The family, it's like ETF or something. It's like our EFT. It's when you basically recall moments when you're younger and then you're able to sort of, I don't know, be compassionate with that younger self and understand that that behavior that you're carrying forward isn't something you need to hold on to anymore. And that was something that was really helpful for me with fundraising because, you're in your own head and you're just people say no, 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 no. And it is, you just hear no, 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 no all the time. And it kind of takes you back to these moments where you feel inadequate or you feel like you couldn't do it as a kid. And you have to kind of learn how to be with those versions of yourself and let go of the ones that aren't relevant to you anymore. And I think that helps you just decipher what information you take in from other people, because everyone just has subjective opinions. And that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't valuable. But in your head, it can feel like that,
Yeah,
over
I'm not
time.
enough. Every time, every no is like, yes, of
Yeah.
course, because I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
How did you, as a part of being a founder, why I love this game is sometimes you have to work on yourself to transform yourself. For example, with cold outreach,
Mhm.
it seems like something that's incredibly uncomfortable to do. You put
Yeah.
yourself in such a vulnerable position. It also ties to a lot of things like I'm scared to be seen, I'm scared
Mhm.
of receiving a no, am I being enough? How did you go through the transformation where the business requires it? You just
Yeah.
have to do it. It's not an option, and it's an incredible opportunity for growth for you personally as well. How did you go about moving in this transformation?
Yeah. So the long story is that after my first like chapter break, so to speak, right? I'm mid 20s. I quit my first startup that I was the first employee at. And I had a little bit of an identity crisis or quarter life crisis because, again, I had hit this like milestone of, and I was like pursuing this thing, and I told my family I was going to do it. And I was kind of angry at everyone. And then I did all the things, and I was like, okay, I don't really feel better. I don't really, this isn't, I'm not, I don't know. I didn't hit nirvana. I'm like, what is this? I just worked so hard and I pushed up this mountain and I got here, and now what? And so I ended up taking some time to reflect and do some like inner work for about 8 months, where I was consulting and I had my own LLC where I would help people build websites, and I'm like really good at visual design. I can like do it while I sleep. So I would just make money like doing that a couple hours a week. And then the rest of the time, I spent a bunch of time reading. I went to this like retreat center and worked there for a little bit. And I just was able to sort of decompress in that first chapter of my life and figure out, why was I angry? Like, what was I going up against? And again, that ultimately was me becoming a human, and understanding what my path was. But I released a lot of the blame, like you talked about, from my parents. And I got to the point where I was looking ahead and I was thinking about building a company, and it just kind of felt like it hit me. Like, again, I met Shavine, I saw the opportunity, it all kind of crystallized and catalyzed in a way that felt very different from that first chapter of my life when I was kind of in this battle, like going uphill. And this was more like I was being called. I sort of feel like it was flowing through me, and felt very organic and natural, which was really cool. It felt like a lot of the dots were just connecting for me. And I knew that it was going to be hard. Again, my sister, she's really been like a guide for me in the whole experience. And she's like, Kendall, you should probably go work at Google for a little bit, or like go to HBS, or go get a MBA, build up a network. Exploding a founder, you need a network to get this thing to go. And I was like, yeah, screw it. She's like, she's like, not everyone knows what Warson's is, or, Mark Jacobs and da, da, da. And I was like, whatever. Like, I don't think it matters. She was so right. Like, we went out and we were trying to fundraise, and it was like, okay, we don't have anyone to talk to. Like, who we're not going to have a mentor that we can just call up that I've worked with, that's going to introduce us to the right pre-seed investor. And so I think in that moment, like, because she had told me that, again, I knew she was right. And I kind of knew, okay, there's workarounds, right? But we're just going to have to work harder. So what we did was I think we've pitched probably 400 plus, maybe 500 investors. It's been insane because we started so cold without any type of connection. And we're doing something that isn't like a traditionally sexy, like venture backable market. Like, there hasn't been a $1 billion exit in the art space. So people look on Crunchbase and like, like not a lot of comparables here. So we ended up going out and joining all of these like founder communities, and a lot of them have directories where there are experts, and like mentors. And we would, or I guess I would, contact basically every single person that had like investor anywhere in their bio, and specifically targeted people that were of color or that were women. And I said, hey, I'm an underrepresented founder looking to connect with underrepresented investors. Like, can I talk to you for 15 minutes? And that worked really well. Like, it opened up a lot of doors for us to have conversations with total strangers that were, some of them went very south and they were like very mean to me, but a lot of people would end up being like, Kendall, I think you have an infectious passion here. Like, there's something here. Let me introduce you to my friend. Let me introduce you to this person. And it was kind of this chain of, one person introduced you to another person, another person, another person. All of a sudden you're on like the seventh chain of that one link that came to that cold outreach, and you get your first 50K investment, and it's really hard to, okay, like Steve Jobs said, connect the dots looking forward, but looking backwards, it's like, oh, that worked because of that first conversation that I had. So I learned to be extremely generous with my time. Like, that's something I have as a core value now. And I work on being really generous with people that are looking to connect with other folks. Like, I think that's not what you're taught. I think you're taught as a founder to be really efficient and like hyper prioritize. And generally, that's just not what served me with opening up doors. And I think the kind of random conversations I've had with people, listening more than talking, being really generous fundamentally and like trying to think about, again, this sort of abundance mindset has been what's shaped and catalyzed like those moments where we met our lead investor because someone uh, recommended I speak to this engineer. And I was like, we don't really need an engineering person right now. Like we have a lot of engineers. And my co-founder was like, why would you take that call? But get on the call, I talked to him and he's like, you know what? I really should introduce you to my friend who just got back from Art Basel. Meet his friend who's like the partner at this fund who ends up leading our seed round. And it's just one of those things where, you wouldn't, if you're being hyper efficient with your time, which I do think is important to do, but there's something about like human generosity where if you're really open and seeing the dots connect, there's just more opportunity and luck that comes your way. So yeah, I try to remind myself that with cold outreach. As you know, it's really hard and people are inundated with information online today, like outreach and stuff. But I think there's a way to craft a message that resonates with folks. And you just have to kind of hit the right note where people are open and they're like, okay, this is interesting. I'll give this woman 10 minutes of my time. And then you just really try to capitalize on that 10 minutes and it can open up, tons and tons of doors.
And how do you go about that structure? For all of the founders now trying to,
Yeah.
okay, that's interesting, I'll try it.
Yeah. I actually think this is something I'm very good at. I've gotten to the point of crafting this as a skill through a lot of trial and error with investors. Again, that whole underrepresented founder looking for underrepresented investors, that's what opened up and created a network for us on that front. I think cultivating the network is just as important as catalyzing it, like giving those investors updates, like keeping a Rolodex of everyone's names written down and how you met them and following up and saying, thank you for introducing me to this person. And going back to those people is really, really valuable because it closes the gap and again, kind of builds the circle around you that keeps getting stronger and stronger. I think in general with cold outreach, now we're obviously less on the investor side. We're doing it more for our go-to-market. And a big unlock for us has been looking at art fairs and trying to get into, art fairs have this whole stratification system. And you want to get to the tier one, but you kind of have to start like at the bottom and climb up. And it's really interesting being a startup because you don't want to come out and say, okay, we'll sponsor your fair for 100K. Like we don't have that money, so you kind of have to pitch this like really creative partnership approach where they feel like they want you to be at the fair and they want to introduce their galleries and their artists to you as a distribution channel. So we have really leaned on content I know you do too. Like we would reach out to the fair directors on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and basically say, we'd love to have you be a thought leader and we'd love to have you be someone that can share your insights with our community. And it's genuine, like these fair directors, they're at like the forefront of the industry. But most people do, like in this conversation right now, like people want to talk about their own experiences and they want to have a platform to grow their own brand. So that has 85% of the time opened up doors and positioned us in a way where we can end up being partners for these fairs versus being sponsors. And I think we've used that across many different paths, but you sort of have to start with giving something before you expect to receive something. And I think you have to really play on people's egos. You have to make people feel special and heard. And if you are able to do that successfully, they'll kind of identify you as a friend versus this person that's like in their ear, wants something from them. So again, it's going back to being generous and like being generous with your time, being generous with your ask, with your give. I think just thinking about receiving that message, like what would you want it to say? A lot of founders aren't thinking like that. They just think they have this product. Of course people want to use it. It's like, maybe they do, but they're not going to pay attention to you until you really warm up to them and until they see you as someone that they can trust.
And I think this is something that a lot of founders don't understand.
Yeah.
They only look at the startup as a business metrics, users, business metrics. But in reality, we're all humans.
Mm-hmm.
We all have this 80, like some have 100 years of like lifespan that we spend here. Whatever we do, at the end, it's not going to matter much.
Yeah.
But we have the opportunities to play this game any way we want. We have so many people playing on this sandbox of a
Yeah.
world. And if you can just genuinely allow yourself to be that kid with exciting eyes, trying to learn about other people, what they're playing, I think that would make it easier for people to outreach, to be more curious,
Yeah.
and to treat everyone else as human beings first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, drink your own Kool-Aid, like talk to people when they reach out to you too. I think I try to be really thoughtful when founders reach out about investor connections, and sometimes it's like, oh, I have to spend 15 minutes like writing this introduction, but there's something about, again, the generosity there where you just can't understand how that's going to come back to help you, but it will, and it compounds, and there's something, to your point, underlying in our human experience that just rewards that type of behavior. And I think you really need to lean on that as a founder, because again, it's an uphill battle and you need as much tailwind as you can get.
What do you think about the role of luck in the world? What do you think luck is, and how do you maximize your chances of getting lucky?
Yeah, I think there was a, I don't know if it was in the New York Times, but it was like a really interesting study where they were looking at people that identify themselves as lucky or unlucky, and they gave everyone the same quiz.
Newspaper.
What?
I heard one with the newspaper.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
said
yeah, yeah, yeah.
count the
Yeah,
pictures. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, the newspaper. And then it was basically like, as you read the newspaper, the people that actually read it picked up on the messages that said, this is part of the experiment. But a lot of people skimmed through it, the ones that consider themselves unlucky, and they weren't looking for like that sort of hidden message. And I think, to me, that's very true. Like, a lot of people that identify as being, I don't know, kind of like a victim, or it's like the world is against them, and um, they are sort of waiting for things to come to them, versus people that are looking for opportunities and like really reading the fine print and immersing themselves in learning and connecting dots between other people. I think that those are the folks that are lucky, but I don't know if it's this magical thing. I think it's just that you bring this energy to the world, and people are excited by it, and then it just opens up more doors. And like my grandpa, he always said, you make your own luck. And I kind of think it's true. Like, I think if you work harder than other people and you show up for other folks and you go above and beyond, it's like writing a handwritten letter. Like, those types of things, they have a profound impact on how people see you as a human being. Like, I have a really good friend that just asked me to be her bridesmaid, and she put the "will you be my bridesmaid" in a fortune cookie and like took me to dinner. And I was like, I feel like I was getting proposed to. It's like, this is so, like, amazing way to ask a friend to do this. And I don't know, I'll just never forget. I was so touched by it, and it was so thoughtful. And she's someone that I think is always, she kind of looks like a lucky person, right? On the outside, like, she's happy, she's joyous. Same thing with my sister. Like, she's someone that it seems like life comes easy to her, but she wakes up every day and like goes for a run, and she like chooses to be happy and chooses to be positive and optimistic. She's always trying to see the opportunities and the connections. The way that she got her job in this VC firm that she works at now was that she was a chief of staff at another fund, and she was writing these newsletters for their community. And one of the newsletters submissions was looking for this role for this new fund. And she was like, you know what? I was going to put this in the newsletter, but can I just apply for it? And like,
Like nobody's applying.
yeah,
It's just
exactly.
one person.
She's like, I'm just going to do it myself, and now she's a partner there. And she didn't go again to HBS or Stanford. Like, she went to a great school and worked really hard, and she just persevered. She found a good opportunity and a path, and she took the shot. And I think that, to me, it looks like luck on the outside, but it's really comes down to hard work and believing and just having hope and faith that the dots might connect in a way that's favorable.
Like this is the same in my mind with connection to people talking about high vibrations. How you
Yeah,
get yourself in it's all about the state of mind. Because as your grandfather said, we create our own state
yeah,
of approaching the world, how the world sees us and how it reacts us. because the physicists, they look at the universe and it's all waves, it's particles, they're
Yeah.
like fourth, fifth dimensions, and it's like we don't understand how this works. But there is something about like our attitude in terms of manifesting things into our life, like
Mhm.
how good are we in attracting things, that like the way we feel, the way we think about them.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of times where we fall into like being victims when things don't go our way. I think everybody has that
Yeah.
every once in a while. And usually it's in the times when there are just too many responsibilities. And when you're in a victim state, you don't have to like deal with responsibilities. Did you find any good ways of picking yourself back up, getting back on the saddle
Hmm.
during those times where you feel like the world's against you?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Uh, well, A, I think it's a muscle. I think the first time you get knocked down, it hurts pretty bad. It's you're sort of banged up a little bit. Now, when it happens to me, my recovery time is so fast, and I almost kind of laugh through it now because I see it happening. But in the early days, it just hurt. It's like people reject you, people like say kind of mean things to you. Like why are you doing this? Or um, you think you're going to get to a yes, and all of a sudden you get to no, like you're on your 10th meeting and you thought that it was locked in, and it's just like just goes out completely. And I think especially with fundraising, it's like someone is punching you in the face. It's just like so painful. And I think in the beginning, I again would talk to my sister, and she would just say, I told you it's the hardest job. So I think complaining, you feel kind of stupid complaining when you realize, like, okay, I'm trying to do something that's really hard. And I have like some very funny stories of, especially with fundraising, where like I would watch the Arnold Schwarzenegger videos where he was like, when you hear no, you have to hear yes. It's like just kind of, he gives really good motivational speeches, and I would just be like on YouTube at night by myself in bed, and I'm like, okay, kind of like just start to hear yes when people say no. And I kind of like rewired my brain a little bit to the point where if someone shuts me down, now I kind of think like they're crazy. And it's weird. It's like I sort of believe like they're missing an opportunity, and like whatever, like they don't, I'm not going to let them get me down. So that's kind of how I think about it now. And again, if I get punched in the face now, it hurts less. I'm able to get up much faster. It still happens all the time. And every day I have a high high. I always have a low low as a founder. And it's so frustrating. It's like whenever I have a big win, it can happen in my personal life, but it's like these moments when, it's just do. It's inevitable. Right. And so I try to really weather the storm and like stay kind of calm. I do a lot of stuff for myself. Like I will run a lot. I play soccer 4 times a week. I journal. I like meditate. I do a lot of breathing exercises. I walk my dog. Like I think there's basic stuff like that that really does help you keep a stable nervous system that you need to do in order to stay sane, and again, in order to like get back up after you've been punched. And I think I also kind of let myself feel it now, when someone really does like say no, or if it's just like a tough day, I'm just like, okay, fuck, I'm just like, okay, it's just like let it happen, feel it, and just be okay with it. It's like it's hard. What can you learn from this experience? How can you grow? And just like let yourself process it a little bit. Don't try to just shut it out immediately, or go drink, or like go and try to make yourself feel good all of a sudden. Like just feel it for a little bit. And I think that it makes it feel less scary and less intense and impactful when you realize like, okay, that was something that happened, and it doesn't have to take up a huge part of myself. And the more you look at something, I feel like, if you give it attention, it kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller if you don't want it to sit within you anymore. So I try to treat that as like an introspective thing, in order to stay sane and keep going
Yeah.
and not be affected by all the no's.
Sometimes I feel like there is this, it's called, I think, internal parts system
Mhm. Yeah,
in
yeah,
psychology, where you kind of have this little baby.
yeah,
Like I have a baby Shamil who I just have to pick up,
yeah,
say, just cry. It's fine.
yeah,
We'll get to it. I'm here. the natural leaders here, we'll get through it. It's okay to spend like an hour just feeling shit.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would have a like low motivation day in the morning. I'd be like, okay, I can envision this version of me going to the gym straight in the morning, sitting down at the table, doing a podcast, having an internal team meeting, meeting with 3 clients, just doing everything, still having a lot of time, looking at my partner thinking, okay, how do I make her happy? Like do this one small thing.
Mhm.
And I'm lying there and I'm like, it's so easy. Like like everything is right there. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
What is stopping me? Why
Yeah.
am I not doing that? And what I found for me is, as you said, a muscle.
Hmm.
First thing I would do is I would switch off. I'd be like, I'm that person. I switch off thinking. That's it. I'm in that moment, switch off any thought.
Hmm.
First thing I do, just get my gym bag, regardless. Do I have anything to do? How do I feel? Just gym bag, put the shoes on, hop, get in the car. That's it. I'm in the gym. Next, come home, coffee, sit down next to computer, delete anything like games, anything that's distracting, do a bit of work. After a while, it's like you're almost changing to a completely new person,
Totally. Yeah.
right? Is it the way that it worked for you too?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think it's there's such a big difference between thought and actions and how you're feeling. And I think the thought piece can go in circles sometimes. Like I'm thinking about like my board deck. I always like, oh, I have to like do a board deck. And I think it's like Jeff Bezos said, like the easiest way to be stressed out is to procrastinate. If you just start a little bit, like if I just take actually some bullet points on my phone about what my deck's going to be about, I'll feel way better. And it's just kind of like little steps, taking action, going outside, going for a walk, just put yourself in the mode of doing the thing, right? Like sit down at your computer to get rid of the distractions, and then it kind of flows, But if you're in bed just sulking, of course you're not going to want to like go to the gym, but you got to put on the outfit, And I think go get your gym bag, and that just helps you get things moving, And I think that's why soccer's been really helpful for me. So often I just am so tired, and I always play at night, and it's like you've had this long day and you're like, I don't want to go run around, but then you go out there and you put on your like little shin guards, and somehow you're just in this like uniform and you're off your phone and you're totally disconnected, and then you feel so much better. And it's really important to just like get over that hump of your head when you're in your thoughts, when you're kind of running yourself in a circle, and just again put on the outfit, take action, and generally you can get out of your own head pretty quickly.
And you've also mentioned meditation.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen for you?
I think I've had an interesting journey with meditation. I mean, I think when I was doing a lot of the work, and when I was working at the retreat center, I was in this tiny house, and I would basically meditate. There was no technology, and so I was off my phone. I was doing a lot of meditation and processing, and again reading. And then there was kind of this guy at the center that I would ask questions to, and he would answer my question with another question, which would just like spin me out, and run around. And again, I think of it like a muscle. I think I really learned how to meditate there. And I think when you're meditating, it's like the stillness. And a lot of people are really good about routine and habit. I'm not like a habitual person. I think I'm someone that I kind of like the diversity of every day. I mean, I do go for a walk every morning with my dog, and I like play soccer, and those are like my two things. But I kind of have like a different coffee order most of the time, and I'm someone that's like wearing different outfits. Like I kind of like to just have nuance to my day. And so for meditation, I'm not like a 3 p.m. sit down hour person every week. But I will notice when I'm feeling overwhelmed or if I'm feeling like anxious, and I'll know I need to spend 15 minutes completely silent and meditate essentially. And I'm somehow able to access that same headspace of being in that retreat center when I did it for like a week. And I don't know how necessarily, but it's like my pool is so deep now because I really like carved this like deep pool that I can just go straight there. And I kind of pop back out. I'm like, okay, I'm good. And so I don't really think I have a normal relationship with it. It's just something that I'm able to access if I put myself in that position, and I lock in, and it's really helpful and healthy for me as a mechanism to sort of recenter and get regrounded.
And if I look at two complete opposites, we have people who are extremely creative
Yeah.
from their childhood. And then it's something that I was studying in England with an international college with a lot of kids from China. And those were like first place mathematics Olympiads
Mhm.
nationwide people. And they're very like OCD with everything has to be
Yeah.
structured. There has to be discipline. There has to be like what I do when I do it. And I would always find it so hard. Like for me, if everything in your day is structured, it's almost like, what's the point of living? You
Yeah.
know exactly what it's going to be like for the next 60 years. You're just going to do all these
Yeah.
things. There is no life in it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're trying to build business, which is something very structured,
Totally.
and it cannot operate in a complete chaos. How do you almost force yourself into getting into structure when you need to?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone is different, right? I think everyone has their, like you said, their own approach to what structure looks like. I, again, grew up with a lot of structure. Like, I am someone that is very disciplined naturally. And so I don't need like as much push to get in. And I'm also so passionate about what I'm doing. If I start doing it, I will start working for like 6 hours, So for me, I actually need more structure around uh, release of energy and actually more structure around non-work because my default is work 24/7. So again, my structure is like on Saturdays, I don't work. I like don't look at my computer. Sundays, I'll work for a couple hours just to get caught up for the week. And then I'm very serious about walking. Like I walk at least 10,000 steps a day. And even if I'm on a trip, I'll like walk in circles around the airport. Like I need it to clear my head. And I also have a lot of structure around like talking to my family. So I try to call my parents, at least every day or every other day. And so for me, that's actually helped create more focus within my company, the more that I'm focused on myself and on my health. And so ironically, like every time I'm not walking or playing soccer or talking to my family, I'm mostly doing Cohort, and I think that that's inevitable as a founder. Like it's so much of your time, so much of your energy. And I think the hard thing is just not letting it absorb your whole life. And so it's almost better to have some boundaries around like your personal life and your health that keep you sane and keep you focused on, making sure that you're feeding like the engine itself that's
Yeah.
building the company.
And when you go for walks, is it mostly music, podcasts? What do you listen to? Or is it
I'm like
just
a total psycho. I'm just full, like no audio. So I
white
just,
noise?
just, no, I don't know. I think I'm just me and I mean, I live in New York, right? Like in Brooklyn, there's so much simulation and um, I just love being outside. I love like seeing the cars, like hearing the sounds, seeing the birds, like walking over the gross trash. Like I think it just kind of centers me to be very present,
Yeah.
And I try to do no audio, and it's totally changed my life. Like I walk so much, and it I think something about it like processes a lot of thoughts for you, and so then you come back and you're able to like feel like everything's distilled. And whenever I'm feeling anxious, it feels like everything's kind of clustered, it's tight, it's stuck, and walking somehow sort of dismantles it all and makes it feel like a pond again, kind of a still ocean, which is I think the state that I'm always trying to make sure I'm regulating. And I think everyone's different, right? Like some people need more activity. Some people need um, less activity and more like reflection time or more journaling, whatever it is, talking to friends, more social time, more alone time. So I think you just have to figure out what your formula is to sort of find that equilibrium.
What are you most excited about right now?
I'm really excited about, I mean, where our company is. I think we have like the first semblance of product market fit where things are working and people aren't paying for the product and we have recurring revenue. So like, it's really exciting. It's every day there's something that really like yesterday we just had the first $70,000 sale process through like our invoice system, and I don't know, like 3 months
Congrats.
ago. Yeah, it was like $70 pieces, and we're kind of like a kind of pass through on transaction volume. Like we're not really making revenue off that, but it's a signal that like we're getting high quality businesses to use the software systems because they have high value sales. And we also have now fairs that are approaching us that are like tier one fairs in our world. And so for me, it's a really exciting time in our business. Like I think we've figured a lot of things out through trial and error. And I'm really excited about how I've grown as a person throughout the experience. Like I'm really proud of myself and I'm really proud of my relationship with my co-founder, with my team. And we have so much opportunity ahead of us. And I think it's important to take stock and to sort of recognize and reflect like how much you evolve throughout this experience, because you have to reflect in order to kind of catalyze the next wave forward. And so, yeah, I'm kind of in that state now where it feels like a really great shift. And I'm fully showing up for it. I think we're all 110% there and excited to carry things forward into the future.
I feel like you'd be an amazing performance coach. Like for so many people, like the way you've kind of went through the transformation, I feel like a lot of people I talk to, they're still struggling in a way. It's like all deep in the work, stress, without having an opportunity to understand who they really are and
Mhm.
grow from the place of that's what I love to do and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it's very different when you're like digging down versus being pulled up. It's a different feeling. And it's like trying to exercise when you're in shape versus not in shape. It's just like painful trying to run when you haven't run in a while, and then when you're in shape and you're running and you feel like it's flowing through you, it's yeah. So I think a lot of it's muscle at the end of the day, and like you just got to get in the zone of knowing that you're growing with the thing that you're building, and it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but you've got to celebrate the wins and you've got to celebrate the milestones, and then yeah, whenever you get punched in the face, just get back up and keep going.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today because I know you have a very busy day today. For coming to the podcast. I hope that this is not going to be the last podcast that we do together because I think there are a lot of interesting parts of your journey that I would personally, selfishly, would really like to explore further. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Shamil. It's great to be on with you, and I'm really excited about what you're building with the podcast and honored to be part of it.
Thank you. That's a pod.